Hey everyone, welcome to the 21st SGS Podcast, where we dive deep into the crossroads of sustainability and digital transformation, revealing how AI and emerging tech can drive real impact in fight against climate change. It is time for bold action, fresh perspectives, and future-ready mindsets. Let's explore how sustain, grow, and lead sustainable change together. In an era where science denied, where inactions to fight climate emergency is becoming fashionable, we need to act urgency and secure the planet for humanity and businesses to coexist and thrive in the 21st century. And I take a great pleasure and an opportunity to welcome our distinguished guest, Dr. Ravi Fernando, has spent more than 25 years in helping of transforming to a better world, I would call it, and there's so much for him to contribute. So without further ado, Dr. Ravi, I would allow you to give a small introduction for our audience to get a good idea about what you have contributed and so much that you love to contribute into the future. Over to you, Dr. Ravi.
Okay. Thank you, Dishana. It's indeed a great honor and privilege to be part of this 21 SGS podcast series. My commitment to sustainability and sustainable business, I think the journey started as a business manager working for a multinational called SmithKline Beecham International. And my initial role was in East Africa, based in Kenya. And as I got into the business side of things, I began to realize that there was more to business than simply delivering profit numbers. And that opened my eyes to the whole concept of triple bottom line, which was mooted by John Elkington in 1997, where he said a business to succeed must have an economic growth model, must not harm the environment, and must contribute to social progress. And this completely fascinated me because I began to realize that there's more to business than simply delivering profits. And at that time, I was very much an aggressive, achieve the business numbers kind of business leader. And I thought it's time that I understood this subject better and invested my time after that at the Cambridge University first to study the subject of sustainability and sustainability strategy. And having completed both a postgrad and a master's degree in the subject, I also had the good fortune of doing my advanced management studies at INSEAD, which has more to do with strategy. And about that time, I continued to drive the business in East Africa. And from the time I got fully qualified to understand sustainability, the company moved me to various positions, initially to UK and then to the Middle East to run the Middle Eastern businesses, and from there to set up business and run in Vietnam. And during this entire period, I began to practice what I had learned at Cambridge and also dovetail it to what I had learned on strategy. So I've been a multinational manager who embedded sustainability into corporate strategy. And that's sort of the background that I come from, Dishana.
Oh, thank you very much, Doctor, for that lovely explanation. This is quite an achievement, and I'm sure that you have much more to contribute as you go along. Sustainability is not a it's not just a word or a subject. It's a business imperative. So I wanted just to make sure that everyone understands that it also has its own challenges, and at the same time, it can open up for a whole heap of opportunities. And that's what we're going to talk about in this podcast. Rather than informing people that you need to be sustainable, but we're also trying to open up how sustainability can be a significant opportunity for you to grow your businesses and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about more on as we proceed. So, Doctor, I have a first my first question to you is like, how long have the world leaders know of the climate emergencies is a crisis or is an issue?
Thanks, Dishana, for that question. I also want to just jump in on the point you made. Sustainability and sustainability strategy can become a very, very strong competitive advantage to grow your business. So you can be sustainable and grow your business at the same time. Getting on to your question, how long have world leaders known of the climate emergency and its causes? I would say the United Nations got fully engaged with this subject and commissioned the then Prime Minister of um, Prime Minister Brundtland of Norway to investigate why global climates were changing. And in 1987, going back 36 years, they published the first formal report titled Our Common Future. And it was also referred to as the Brundtland Report. And that's the first time there was a thorough investigation of how the global climate was changing and also the importance of how carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases were beginning to warm the planet, and the urgent need to exit fossil fuels was first documented in this report. And in this report, Brundtland also defined the term sustainable development. And she came out with the simple definition where she said sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations. And this report was extremely well accepted at that time in 1987. And all the world leaders began to realize that basically the world was on a path of unsustainable development and that they urgently needed to exit fossil fuels. And since then, the United Nations has had many key initiatives, meetings to try and drive this fact home, uh, starting with the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio, Brazil, where 190 world leaders all committed to bringing about change in their countries in terms of moving away from greenhouse gas causing fossil fuels and other areas to basically start making the world a more sustainable planet. However, despite that initiative, there was also the beginning of the COP meetings. And it is not a coincidence that the 29th Congregation of Parties meeting is being held as we speak right now in Azerbaijan. And they've had 29 meetings over the last 37 years. And every one of these meetings was dedicated to taking action to reduce carbon emissions in the world. And there was a meeting held in 1992 in Japan called the Kyoto Protocol. There was then the game-changing meeting that was held in Paris in 2015, where finally, after between 1987 and 2015, there was yet no serious action being taken. But in 2015, the world leaders signed to a document and said, we will reduce our carbon emissions and reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and move towards 2030, gave a 15-year target, whereby 2030, all nations will achieve 80% of their energy requirements from renewable sources by 2030. And the Paris Agreement was signed. There was a lot of celebration. Ban Ki-moon, I think, was the UN Secretary General at the time. And the whole world sort of finally woke up to the reality that we had to reduce carbon emissions. If we didn't, the planet would heat up. And the basic reason they wanted to advance the 2015 agenda or the 2030 agenda was because they wanted to make sure that the global average temperatures since the launch of the Industrial Revolution in 1880, that the average temperatures wouldn't cross a plus 1.5 degrees centigrade, and that we had to urgently move towards renewables to ensure this is achieved. Well, the 2030 agenda, as it was referred to, was also supported by 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which was launched under the leadership of Kofi Annan, who was then the Secretary General. And the world continued to chug on after that. And we were all expecting to see dramatic increases of renewable energy in every country. But that was unfortunately not to be.
Well, thank you, Doctor, for that insight. I I believe that in the last few years, I would say the last 5 to 6 years, that there's a dramatic shift in terms of people moving into sustainability, renewable alternatives in terms of technology being advanced. If you take the automobile industry, it's taking dramatic changes, and people, how they consume their resources, people are much more aware. But I think still there is a generation which is still don't believe in that, which is quite sad. But I'm strongly um, I see strongly in the younger generation, which is focusing on more and more sustainability initiatives, and they try to adhere to those functions because of it's their future which they need to protect. That also leads into my next question is why have all these UN lead interventions is not resulting the major um, in resulting in any major phases out of fossil fuel? Any particular reason, or rather, why do you how do you see this is not happening?
Very, very good question, Dishana. And also, I must allude to the fact that what you mentioned, that the younger generation, Generation X, Y, Z, and the millennials are totally on this subject. But majority of the new generation are not in positions of influence, either in their countries or in companies, to make a major shift in terms of this whole activity.
That's for sure.
That is one of the things that are inhibiting this. And also, this nicely dovetails with the point that Brundtland made, that sustainable development is ensuring that we don't take from future generations, but we are doing that at the moment. So my understanding as to why the massive requirement of phase out of fossil fuels hasn't happened. So let me give some statistics. As at today, we have about a 30 to 32% of our energy requirements met with renewable energy sources, which is a combination of hydroelectricity, solar power, and wind power, and other biomass interventions. But there's yet 60%, 68% actually, yet with fossil fuels as we speak in the year 2024. Now, what has delayed? Why is there a lack of urgency to achieve this number? And in recent meetings, in the recent COP meetings, especially if I look at COP 26, 27, 28, and the COP meeting that is happening in Azerbaijan right now, there has been a direct thrust not to move forward and to postpone this target date of 2030 to 2050. And some countries have even postponed it, achieving this 80% target to 2070. So, why has this happened is the real question that you're asking. I think there are about three factors that have impacted this change. I would say the first factor is that a majority of the leaders who are in positions of influence unfortunately do not come from a science background to appreciate the impact of greenhouse gases in terms of basically having a debilitating effect on the planet. And as someone said, people don't worry about challenges and issues that are to come in the future. They want to worry about issues that are in the present. But leadership is not about just sorting out each day's problems. Leadership is also about anticipating the future problems and taking action to do that. So I would say number one is there has been a lack of science appreciation at a leadership level. Number two, has been also a massive amount of science denial, even amongst some of the most important leaders of the world. And when you are denying science, or you are unaware of the science which talks of the impacts to the planet, then obviously you're not going to be in any sense of having any sense of urgency to influence the move to renewable energy sources. So, unfortunately, over the last 36 years, uh, we are slowly but surely coming to a stage where the plus 1.5 degrees centigrade target, which was set at the Paris Agreement, is now looking like we are going to cross it next year in 2025, which is just a few months away from us at the moment. And some of the GDP impacts that we are now discussing in terms of the impact due to extreme weather incidents increasing on the global economy, which is at the moment about $105 trillion, could be anything from 4% to going up to nearly 30% as we cross these very, very uh, these targets of plus 1.5 going to 2 degrees to 3 degrees and to 4 degrees. So we are now sitting on a powder keg because the extreme weather incidents are now beginning to basically devastate global economies. And the question is, should we keep burning fossil fuels and let the global economy get devastated to the tune of 4 to 11 to 17 to 30%? Or should we reduce our carbon emissions by moving away from fossil fuels and make sure that we don't let that happen? So we are now sitting at a situation where world leaders are unfortunately beginning to not take the kind of actions that are required, Deshana. And just to sum up that point, at COP29, there were world leaders who basically said that they would not be changing their energy mix because they feel that they have been, blessed with fossil fuels, and they want to continue to use fossil fuels for the future as well. And there has also been a major change in leadership, as you know, in the last month in the United States, and that also can have a major impact on on world leaders moving towards renewable energy, because we now have a new leadership in the US that has been climate denying. And the last time this leader came into power, he pulled the USA from the Paris Agreement, pulled it out of the Paris Agreement. So we are now looking at a prognosis where the world is going to cross plus 1.5. We are now possibly looking at a 2.2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade world with temperatures going up dramatically and a massive impact on global economies devastated due to extreme weather incidents. So this is really the prognosis. And even though it sounds quite hopeless, I think one thing we have to bear in mind is every step we take in the right direction is going to help us survive in the future.
Thank you, Doctor. I think this subject alone we can talk about for hours, but we have our time restrictions. But we can park it on to the next episode. And it's a good foundation. What you basically spoke about in terms of, um, the mindset. You need to have the right mindset to make changes. If not, the motivations won't come, and the methodologies won't flow through. And one of the things that I have observed throughout the year is that some of the alternatives which is coming up for fossil fuel is still not giving the traction which is for the demand is concerned. That's I see in a very objective angle. I think that something can be fixed. Technology is advancing. I see solar panels can perform much better with the much low light conditions in certain parts of the world. And the cost of those units are coming down. So that's a good news.
Yes.
And also the electrification is picking up. A lot of people are moving into electrification in terms of mobility because 60% of the world's oil demand is coming for mobility. So that's a significant space to look at. But I strongly believe at the same time that we also can use the existing technologies to improve efficiencies and reduce waste. As you know, globally, there is 40% of the food production is go on waste. And that's something that you can reduce. That itself has an immediate impact to the environment by reducing whatever the percentage that you're willing to do. That's why this podcast is basically generated to give people more and more insight. You don't have to do anything crazy out there. Just look at what you're doing currently and try to do better in terms of improving your efficiencies, improving your technology, using artificial intelligence, where you will get your current base in a more optimum level. And based on that optimum level, then you bring renewable energy um, solutions into it because you already have start reducing your level of consumption, and then you bring renewable energy sources which gives less demand of your usability itself. So that has a huge impact to you. So the spillover effects are quite remarkable.
Yes.
This is a collective effort. It's not by one single um, government or a country can achieve. It's a global efficiency. And at the same time, businesses has to think in that way. Individuals has to think in that way. And I also wanted to summarize this with one last question. How much we need to invest on each year to move forward for renewable energy drive planets? This is a very critical question. I have been listening to multiple sources. The amount of investments which needs to go into sustainability initiations are quite high, but the investment which is flowing through is very, very, very low. Sometimes even 20%, which is being marked upon. So I wanted to hear from you. What is your point of view on this as the last question?
Okay, thanks, Dishan. And I think you made a very valid point that the world's technologies have all now developed to a level where mobilizing these technologies is possible. We have perovskite solar panels, which are increasing our efficiencies of solar panels from about 11-12% to nearly 30% to 40%. We have smart grids driven with AI, which are able to brilliantly manage the grid efficiencies. The batteries storage levels have increased and we have massively deployed batteries, but there's so much more we can do. So the technologies are all very much in out there. The question is, can we afford it? And the figure that has been given in the at the UN meeting was about $6.2 to $6.4 trillion per annum. If we were able to mobilize that amount of funds every year, the world can easily progress to achieving its 80% renewable energy target by 2030. We can yet do that if we start mobilizing it in the next 5 years. And of course, the million-dollar question is, from where do we get this money? And the answer to that is staring in everyone's face, because sadly, the world has been subsidizing the use of fossil fuels each year to make fossil fuels, the cause of the climate emergency, cheaper for people to go for. So the subsidies currently stand at $7 trillion. So the way to fund the $6.4 trillion that we need a year is to put a halt to the subsidies and transfer that money to moving into renewable energy. So all we need is world leaders to take the decision on clamping down on subsidies and transferring that money into renewables. And if we do that, we can yet at least make sure we don't cross the 2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade barrier in the future.
Oh, thank you very much, Doctor. That's a very encouraging number. And also, the common sense is always not common. So this is a very good point that you highlighted, that we have the resources in our disposal, but we just have to channel it to the right sources.
Absolutely.
And that also leads into our next podcast, which we're going to talk about a little bit more on the 21st century leadership.
Correct.
And it's a very critical thing. Here, what we're trying to achieve is not only talking about problems which is going on, but also giving alternatives and what those alternatives can give you short-term and mid-term and long-term success. End of the day, people will change for three fundamental reasons. One reason is that they have to change because they have no other choice. And that's a choice that we don't want to make. We don't want the planet to come and really put us in difficult situations, and then we have to change. COVID-19 was a good example. Digital transformation took place in a very significant way due to COVID because people didn't have a choice. They have to do it. The second is that we are inspired enough. Therefore, we want to change. And the third point is that we have enough, so we don't mind changing. So either way, we have to change. So either way, you will be in a position to change. The people who have enough can make that change. People need to be inspired by new things so they can change. And also people need to think it's urgent. So therefore you need to change. So I will leave that thought for today. And also I'd like Dr. Ravi to give us a little bit more insights in our next episode on the 21st century leadership. We'll talk about the book that you have written on this regard. And I'm sure that we can learn a lot about that in our next episode. And thank you very much, Dr. Ravi, for your time. And we are surely looking forward to continuing the podcast with you. And we are quite excited. Have a lovely day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dikshana. Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.